All right, so we're here with Phil today. He's a creative coach for Creativity 360. He's
Yeah, a
got
holistic view of creativity of just skills combining with mental fortitude and things like that, because at the end of the day you can have the skills and the talent, but the world as we know is very shaky and it can sweep the rug from out underneath you. And if you're not prepared for that, you're not going to find much success in life or in this field.
Absolutely, and I mean nowadays with so much competition in terms of like your product is not just competing with a product that has the same kind of benefits, but it's actually like a bunch of other tools as there's so many distractions nowadays. And for creatives like ourselves, like we want to stay focused on our purpose, and at the same time, all those distractions out there on top of the things that can be sort of like in a way to resist, that kind of pulls you towards something else. So it's kind of like we kind of have to keep soaring back to like, wait, I'm actually going this way, so I don't want to go that way. And that's kind of like what Phil does, right? Like with your work, would you like to introduce a little bit more about your background and like what you've done, how you got into what you're doing?
Sure. So I actually started at the age of 15. I started working for the first hospice in America, which was actually in my hometown. And they were at the time commemorating 30 years of hospice care in America. And so I got to be part of like this documentary that highlighted all of that, told the history. So it was actually a very profound thing. And so my background is in documentary work. Then I went on to Emerson College, which is very known in the entertainment space, is like one of the top colleges. Every year it's ranked really up there. And I had an opportunity to, continue documentary work, but I also was mentored by the executive producer of Friends named Kevin S. Bright. And that was an incredible
Oh,
mentorship. And
okay.
so my path has kind of been very interesting. And trying to sound it up as short as I can, I got introduced to another Emerson alum, Marie Menounos, who was making a movie at the time, got to work on that. Then her and her partner, Kevin Undergaro, they launched this network called AfterBuzz TV, essentially asked me to be part of it.
I think
And
I saw that on
so,
your Instagram. A lot of that. Yeah.
yes, yeah. So from there, essentially, it took a turn into the digital space. I can't say I was at the earliest onset of podcasting, but it was kind of at the onset when it started slowly becoming like a public consciousness. So I've been doing that. And, when I turned 30, I kind of switched gears and still work on podcasts primarily, but also just expanded into music videos, back to documentaries, narrative features, short films, books, and things of that nature. So just anything creative, I like to be a part of.
Yes, that's awesome. And I mean, what kind of like connected both of us here today is that the fact that, the line of work you've chosen on is basically on helping individuals primarily to expand creativity. Am I right? Like with the approach that you
Yeah, I
take
mean,
on into.
yeah, certainly. So I do the things that I do because it fuels me creatively, but then also, it just showcases that it's possible, right? And my path has been certainly made easier by others. Like one of my people that I aspire to be like is Rob Rodriguez, and he shot his first movie on $7,000, and that made his whole career, right? So just kind of
Wow, that's
yeah, so just kind
crazy.
of thinking, just getting rid of the limiting beliefs, seeing what's possible, and being an example for that and helping pave the way for others. I don't believe in stonewalling any sort of information. I think we all benefit when we share knowledge.
Yeah, not just not external knowledge, but also your inner knowledge, right? Because the creativity itself also has to do a lot with tapping in your innate abilities to just like see through different than like the way they've been programming your mind to do it. Like, why do we have to always follow like the way that it's being told us, but not instead of like being so authentic and original and truthful to ourselves? So kind of like in relation to what you said, $7,000 to make a movie, and that made his career. That's crazy. But like I remember, for example, when I started my career as a musicist, I consider myself as a musicist because I'm not a musician, and at the same time, like I don't like to say I'm a like songwriter, singer, but I make music. Yes, I recorded my videos and everything. And years ago, this battle started in myself, like where I really knew there was like that aspect of me that was like, I know what I'm here in this world. I want to make music. And at the same time, I didn't have the resources. Like I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't have the money to like go for finding the equipment, like finding the producers. But the way just started unfolding because, like, like, oh, look, you can actually reach out to people on this platform where you have access to musicians and they can collaborate together. Or like you have an iPhone nowadays that you can record yourself, and there are all these tools available. And even if you don't have the skills, you can learn essentially how to build the skills in order to complement the work, your innate talent, right? So I think it's important for people to nowadays be aware that the sky is the limit, and that yes, they can follow like their hearts, and at the same time use the external tools to complement them and to impulse them towards
Yeah.
what people tell you that you're supposed to go. I mean, in terms of like goals, vision, and really like making sure you stay focused and on the way. So
Absolutely. And I mean, nowadays, I think too many people get hung up on the quality aspect of it. And that's all subjective. I mean, I could draw stick figures, and if it's funny enough and post it on whatever TikTok or whatever else, if people are enjoying it, why is that lower quality than something else? And in fact, in film, there was a whole movement done by very successful directors called the Dogma 95 movement, which they want solely to focus on story. So they didn't worry about production aspects. They had like these whole set of rules that really restricted them, and in terms of the production value. And yet the stories are so good that it doesn't matter if the sound doesn't sound as good, if it doesn't
wow.
look as high quality as an IMAX camera. You were just sucked into the story, and they're very classic movies. And so it's just, and that was part of their whole thesis, was that it doesn't matter as long as, because I remember in film school, so many people focused on what camera are we going to use, what this and that, and all the equipment. It's like, well, what story are we telling? Let's start there, and then we'll figure out the rest of it. So, I think that
Yeah,
applies to all things.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like a combination, I guess, of the story, the visuals, the timing, because like in life, different things will apply for different things, right? So like when you're able to follow, I mean, I'm not saying I'm totally in opposition of the trends, but at the same time, I feel like for the commercial space, it works really well, right? Like you really be in tune of what's happening in the world, and then you use that opportunity to create something. At least for me, this is one of my weakness, because I feel like as an artist, I can be a little selfish with like what I'm going through, right? And it's like, if you're not a Taylor Swift yet, you can't just like think of yourself of like, this is what I'm going through and I want to put that out into the world. But it needs to be like about finding these external influences in a way that can kind of match with what you're going through, so you can stay authentic and you're not just doing something to please others because you want to be kind of like, oh, I want to be part of this too. But you got to sort of find a connection between the two. And then that's, to me, when it's the perfect combination of like what you're creating, that it's serving the mass as well. Because at the end of the day, it's like, yes, you're not just creating for yourself, right? In anything you do, in any line of work. And let's be just mindful here that when we talk about creation, it's just like, what is creation, right? Phil, like, what is that for you? Like in terms of like what makes one
Yeah, I
person
mean,
an artist?
yeah. So, I mean, I think what you're talking about is interesting, because to me, creativity is both the idea phase, but then the execution phase, right? And
Like
so,
that.
as an artist, right, like whether it's music or a movie, doesn't matter. You're inspired by something, and then you want to go on your sort of path of figuring that out. It is a creative journey. Uh, but the differentiation is to get it over that finish line. So, generally speaking, with any movie or book that I've done, like there comes a point about 3/4 into it where I'm tapped out. Like I've explored this where I'm satisfied creatively, like I'm good. I figured it out. It's nurtured my soul. But when you talk about the need to connect with others, that aspect of it, well, that last chunk of it is for the audience, right? And so,
Yep.
it is in that way. And I think, the idea that I think a lot of times we can focus on ourselves, and if we're going through it, oftentimes we can externalize it. Like And oftentimes, the more specific you are with an experience, whether it's a song, a painting, doesn't matter, the more it can externalize because there is that specificity, right? And I think like there's for me personally, there's tons of movies that I see from all parts of the world. I love foreign language films, and I can see myself within them, even though on the surface there's no commonality. But the human aspect of it remains the same,
Of course, yeah.
friendships or love,
The hero's
whatever.
journey, for example, right? Which is portrayed in so many different ways for like fantasies. But yeah, proceed.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so I think it starts with that nugget where, creativity can be a selfish act, but then in order to really call yourself an artist, regardless of viewership or whatever else, is to get it to that finish line in the best way that you can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing about like finishing it when we start, because as creators, like this would lead us into a whole different path, but like pivoting, like why so many artists pivot in like musical genres or music or like lines of work or like products or companies, like entrepreneurs who has started many different companies before till they realize none of that was actually like what really fulfilled them. Uh, I noticed, at least in my journey, that I pivoted a lot with, for example, like startups and ideas of like businesses that I've had, was because I felt like I would get just like I would start something and then something else would come out that would just be like, but I feel like this is my purpose, not this anymore. And I would just pivot to something else. And that was interesting because like my psychotherapist told me once, like, you don't have to wait until you're ready. You start something and then you get ready on the way, right? Like it's not the job that you're waiting to suddenly come into your life that will pay you thousands, like hundreds of thousands in a year that will make you like ready to start to tap into your purpose. It's not the house, it's not the place, but it's the ability of like, I'm just gonna start and then I'll realize what's on the way for me and I will learn, my weakness, my strengths, and find myself through that process. And at the same time, I've noticed also that you can continue to do what you're doing and actually make it better instead of pivoting. Like you can actually stay focused. So you see there's always duality into different things, right, that we're talking about, because I started saying like, yeah, if you want to stay focused, and at the same time you want to be open to the process of like what's happening, like let me tap into this, let me see that if this is actually like more aligned to my purpose. So what about like using creativity to enhance something that you're already doing to make it better, and resisting the temptation also to stop, to pivot when you realize that you have pivoted enough? And when is that point? Only we know, I guess. I don't know what your takes are on this, but
Well, I think it starts kind of knowing yourself beyond that, because these are all just avenues. Like, I don't think your purpose necessarily is, to make films or to make music or whatever else, right? I think there's a much more deeper core element that aligns with, okay, who we are, what we're trying to accomplish in the world. And these things are just a way of achieving that and showcasing that.
yeah.
So I don't think I think we box ourselves in that way. But at the same time, I do think, especially in the American mindset, freedom is choice. And it's like, well, freedom is also commitment to a choice. You have to do
Ooh.
something, right? And
Oh,
and it
yes.
doesn't mean, listen, especially when you're young, I think there is a benefit to trying out different things and see what sticks. I don't think there's anything ultimately wrong with trying something and whatever. But I think people do it sometimes. They have to be honest with themselves. Am I just chasing this because of the clout? It's the next best trend, that I think it'd be the easier path, or am I doing it from an actual place that aligns with who I am?
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
when you can do that, you can make those pivots because it's coming from an honest place. But and two, I mean, like just on a more practical level, like oftentimes, I try to work on a very small amount of projects because I want to get them done. And if an idea strikes me, I just jot it down. I'm like, just not right now. I think people get restricted in that way of like, okay, well, either you or someone else is telling you no. And it's like, no one's telling you no, just not right now. You can do it 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 2 years from now. It doesn't matter, but just focus on this, get it over the finish line, and then you'll focus on that.
And how do you measure that? Like, is that because, like, at least for me, when I have an idea, and for example, I'm in the middle of writing a song, and then suddenly something strikes in, and it's just like, wow, I never thought of this before. And if that takes over my consciousness at a level where I can't even finish what I had started, I feel like I pivoted immediately to do that thing. It's so like instantaneous. But I guess, like, how do you measure? Is that based on the level of energy, of attention that kind of pulses in your soul, or
I
it's
mean,
just
listen,
like
I
a
think,
lot more
I think,
logical thing of like, it doesn't make sense to do it now, like I can do it later? Because like you seem to be more logical, right? And I feel like I'm extremely emotional, and I will, like, if I feel that spark that is like whoa about something else, and I'm working on something that, like, yeah, it's fine, and you know what I mean? um
yeah, I mean, I think logic for me definitely comes into it. But there are times where, I'll just take maybe a day or two, perhaps even the week, just to explore an idea and be like, hey, would this be really worth pursuing? Um, but I think overall, if nothing else, I just make that big decision initially that eliminates these thousands of decisions, right? So,
mhm.
like, for example, with my second movie, I made a commitment that I'm going to film a movie in Colombia. And then it wasn't a choice of like, wait, should we do this? Blah, blah, blah. It was like, no, how do we do this? Like, that's where the mind all of a sudden triggered. And it confused a lot of people. They were like, wait, are you sure you want to do this? Like, how's this? I was like, no, that decision's already been made. That's not even a question. So either you're on board and you want to be part of that process and we're going to figure it out, or
Yeah,
you don't. And so, yeah, I think if we just um, make a big commitment in that way, the rest can follow. No
I
different than
love that.
like,
Wow.
like if you commit going to the gym, like, hey, I'm going to be a person that goes to the gym. If you can really make that commitment to yourself, then you're not arguing daily of like, do I want to go to the gym or do I not? It's like, no, you've already made the choice that you will go, and whatever, 3 times a week. So
Oh
there's
my
no
gosh.
arguing with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little biased towards there because it's like our emotions can be really strong sometimes, at times where you can make the commitment to go to the gym, and then you just feel like extremely like not it, and it's not like a logical thing of you making excuses in your mind. It's just like your emotional body, like suddenly like you experience this different feelings and everything, and you're just like, you know what, I'm gonna go through this right now. And that's what I kind of tell even some of my mentees, with like taking time to really be in your heart and yet be committed to what you have, like what you're doing, right? Because it is a balance. Like, you want to take care of your feelings too. There are times where we just cannot be a machine and just like, I'm just gonna go on, because like the output, it's not gonna be the same. Like the you're not you won't end up doing something as good as you had intended to do, because people will see that like your projection is not gonna be as beautiful as it is when you're coming from a happy place internally. So what I kind of tell my people, for example, my mentees, is like, work on feeling really good first and do the practices, the things that takes you to that state, and then go on and flow, and you know go to the gym, get those tasks out into place, or like whatever it is that is in your to-do list. So it's a balance, I guess.
It
So
is,
i
but
don't i don't want to disagree with you, but at the same time I
well,
just
they
want to
don't have
be.
to be in opposition, right? And that's why, like, for me, one of the things I call myself is a 360 creative coach, because
Yeah,
in that way, the mental aspect should also be a daily practice of it. So that way you can be at your optimal, not just for the creative, but so you're a good human being out in the world. Um, but at the same time, and if overall you have that routine and that discipline, I don't mind, we all need breaks. So I'm not against breaks. I don't think you have to be a machine.
power naps.
But but there is a side of it, like, I think too many people are spurred on by inspiration. If they're not inspired, they're not going to write. Whereas William Faulkner has this famous quote of he was asked, do you only write when you're inspired? He's like, it's something along those lines, not exact, but I only write when I'm inspired. Luckily, inspiration hits every day at 9 a.m.
Ooh.
Right. And so, listen, we're not going to always have that output every single day. And again,
Yeah.
you can take your breaks if you're being honest with yourself and you really need it, sure. But if you're taking more breaks than you are working, then that might be an issue, right?
Then that
And
means you're not committed to what you're doing, or you don't love this thing enough to do it. Because when you do something you love, it's just like you don't feel like you need to take that many breaks too. It's
yeah,
just
and
life.
it's, and I think, there's this aspect of it, right? It really comes down to being honest, because I remember, whether it's a book launch of mine or a movie premiere, and we're like, oh my God, it's so cool that you made a movie or wrote a book. Well, all those things are available to everyone else. They see the glitz and the glamour. They don't see the literal years worth of work that went into it. Oftentimes in solitude, oftentimes like really hard work, but they don't want that. They just want the notoriety.
Yeah.
So again, and then there's plenty of people that, like, there's so many people that just love movies and think they want to make movies. I'm like, no, you just want to watch movies, which is totally fine, but be honest, you know?
Yeah, honesty, yeah, in all levels. And what you're saying is like people don't know also what's behind the inspiration, right? Because like, yes, like you don't need to rely on inspiration, but there are times in our lives where we're going through things that are actually the perfect catalysts for inspiration. And I used to tell myself, like, when I don't feel like that inspired to create much, it's because there's not much going on in my life. And that has never happened, because there's always something going on. And even that in life is a gift, because if my purpose is in this world is to write songs, is to write in many different levels, like, yeah, whether it's like a post on Instagram, it can be considered also like, it is something that is coming from your heart that you putting out into the world. Like, why should we like undervaluate that in just in comparison to a movie? It's like, creation itself, it like we talked about, can be expressed in different levels. But yes, the using those moments of like pain, hardship, and even like of like those strikes, those insights you get of like something you learned in the past that it's serving to you in this current moment, and combining those two to create a product that serves to the
Yeah. And
world
I'll
as
even
much as
expand it further. We get to, like, you look at like Toltec wisdom that talks about us as creators of our own lives. So we're not talking, it doesn't have to be art or a product. You create a life. You get to make that choice of, okay, am I looking at the situation and am I pissed off? Am I going to be happy? Am I going to be calm? Whatever it comes, right? And so that's why, to me, all of this is synonymous. It's not like oh, you have to only work at your art. It's like, no, at the same time as you're working on your art, that is feeding your soul. And then as you're like living life, that feeds your art, and vice versa. Like
yeah,
the interconnectivity, to me,
that
more and
yin and
more
yang.
becomes obvious.
In
Yeah.
creation, the structure, yeah, yeah, inhale, exhale. It's
Yeah.
like,
But you don't
yeah.
have to be an artist to be a creator. Like I said, we are all creators of our own world and how we choose to see it.
Yes, yeah, I mean, you can embody that creator in this like in the stage of life, right? If you want to play the artist, yes, but know that even that has a cost too, because the moment that you embody or you put yourself in a box of like, this is what I do, you also eliminate a lot of other things, possibilities that could come forth. You end up like blind of them, right? Because you're now putting yourself as like, I only do this and that. You can do that with like, you can follow a path of like doing what you want to do without like the same time labeling yourself or putting yourself in a box of like, this is what I do only, but just basically staying focused to like, no, everybody needs to know what's in your business. Like, they can see it out on the outside, but they don't need to just like read it. And you know what I mean? It's like, this,
Yeah.
this is,
I think, yeah, I think a lot of
yeah,
these
I went
things,
all over, but I think you
no,
understand.
no. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this stuff ends up being, for me at least, I view it as more as marketing terms to convey to people, because it's just easier for them to digest of like, oh, I'm a filmmaker, I'm an author, I'm this. Whereas for me, I don't put labels in that way. I don't care for labels. I like to do stuff, I like to make stuff, and whatever I'm doing at that moment is what I'm making, right? And that can expand or contract. And to my earlier point about the creative aspect, like, someone who's a nurse, right? They're creating a better world by healing, right?
Yeah,
So this idea of creativity can be expanded to
in
all
so
all
many
things.
levels. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's beautiful. That's why I am so passionate about at least like this programming I put together that has to do with like unlocking your creative flow. So it's like a combination of helping people to see what's on their way of them being themselves. That's pretty much it, because who they are essentially is already creation, a creator itself. But like, let's remove all the layers of all like the stories, all the ideas that makes you feel or think that you are this thing, and just break through from it and just be you. And with that, you will understand and learn that you don't need that much externally to fulfill you, because who you are in innate in your innate nature is already what you're seeking outside, right? But obviously there's like a journey that we have to go through. And I wish at the time when I started, I had someone in physical to walk me hand by hand, because when I started, it was just like the universe was just throwing all these different people in my path, all these different books, all these different theories, these different tools and videos. And I want to make it easier for someone who's essentially going through what I'm going through, instead of them going all over, maybe just working with one person, like Phil in the creative coach, for example, like for his line of work where he does, like he understands what the process takes. It takes patience, it takes consistency, it takes some sort of like lapidation, because pain might come out of the process. Like you might have to revisit sometimes stories in your past childhoods to understand why you were programmed that way, like what you have to let go of in order to be you. And I mean, it is the kind of work I'm very passionate about, that I realized later on that through music, that there was something aligned on top of like my primary purpose at the time of like making music, of like showing up on camera and looking happy. Because I mean, that's fun for me. Obviously, it is like a selfish kind of thing. I'm not gonna lie to you. I feel amazing like when I'm on camera and I see myself on it. But it's like I know there's more. And when we're able to like change the life of one person, you realize that you're influencing the whole collectively. It is much more profound, because we understand that power of like it takes one person to heal to influence a line of like a generation, like past generations or future generations to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's sort of the going back to an earlier point you mentioned there, like there's an aspect, like I think we all need someone to help us on the path. And I don't know if it can ever be singular. Like I think we all need various people, because I think just people in general are limited in X, Y, and Z, right? Like even me, as much as I would love to tout myself, I don't think I can offer someone everything. Now, at the same time, too, there's an aspect that, yeah, they're the ones that have to kind of bump their heads along the way, like I love that therapy is becoming more mainstream, but at the same time, do I agree that you should have your therapist information and be able to text them 24/7? No, I think there's times like you have to, it's like you can, bump your head in there, and then at your scheduled session, really talk that out. How did you do? Because I think the reason I say that is what I don't want to have be is this default that other people will solve it for us, that we look to just other people and it's other people's responsibilities. Other people can help us along the way, but I think we also need to accept responsibility, because the truth of the matter is 100% of any relationship in anyone's life is 100% their responsibility. Now, people don't like that. They're like, wait, no, but it's the, and it's like, no. How are you culpable for that relationship? If someone's mistreating you, why are you taking it? Why are you there? And that's the tough part about enlightenment as a journey, of how honest you have to be with yourself. It's not easy.
Yeah,
Because it comes
yeah.
back, it's a mirror.
The truth will set you free, but first will piss you off.
Very much so. Very
Yeah.
much so.
And the relationships, I mean, when it comes to creativity, it's a whole thing, right? Like, oh my goodness, like real relationships are perhaps one of the main seeds for me for any creation that is out there. Like there's always a person, there's always a relationship into something, right? That we are
Yeah.
into. Um, Yeah. Well, we have a few more minutes left here, and we can probably share, maybe you can share some of your tips and your daily lives on what do you do to stay creative, focused, driven, and excited about life,
Honestly,
about your own creation.
honestly just doing it. I think the hardest part is always just getting to, if I'm writing the keyboard. But once I'm there, ideas start to flow. Um, and apart from that, I also, I try to exercise. Like I take my foster dog on walks, I bike, I play
Hi, I
soccer.
love biking
So I
too.
think,
Nice.
again, I think you can't make art without also living, right? And so being ingrained and things of that nature also, yeah, all those things. So that's how I kind of approach it overall.
Do you have a ritual that you would like to share?
I have a ritual. I don't really have a ritual. I do believe in journaling, as well as like future journaling. So if you're especially
Future journaling.
yeah, so it's this you essentially write as if, so whatever your goal is, right? Let's say it's to own a house, to write a book. You write as if you've just written that book, you know? So you'd be writing like, hey, oh my God, I'm so excited. Today I got to type the end at the end of my manuscript. It's so amazing. It went through a bunch of revisions. People really think it's good. I took a lot of time. So you're putting it into your mind that I've already done the thing,
Mhm.
right? And that, call it manifestation, call it like aligning your mind, because, especially when you're starting out, like, let's say you've not written a single word of that book, that's very daunting, right? And all of a sudden, you're only focused on all the problems that are there present of like, wait, how do I even begin? But if you can put yourself in that mindset of, I've already done the thing, then your mind kind of follows of like, okay, well, how do we do that? Because that sounds pretty cool.
So it's like a practice you do on a daily basis, because I've done that before, but it's not something, for example, I adapt on my weekly basis or commit to doing it. So do you think that process is important to do on a daily basis, like, or is this something you just do once a week, or when you feel
I
inspired
think
because you try to manifest something later on?
I mean, a daily practice certainly would be great. But I think once a week works, as well. And again, all these things are like at the end of the day, whatever tool works for you, go for it, right? There's no one singular way to do this. And I think that's the important part is just finding
Well, your way,
your path.
yeah. But that's what I was saying earlier, that like when you're working with someone directly that has tried different things and it knows what works more effectively, it's like it can help you to expand and go much faster and stay focused on, instead of stumbling upon all these different things. Because that's what I felt like at the beginning for me. It happened like, oh, but there's that and there's that and there's that, and someone who was like, I'm sort of like ADHD, but I realized later on that it was just like a label I put on myself for just like inability to just stay engage and focus on one thing that I was excited about, but I wanted to be excited about all things at the same time, or I wasn't excited about nothing at all. That's why I would pivot it. So that's this would be another talk about like my way of explaining HD, ADD, of what I've realized that actually means internally. But my point is, like when you're working with someone who knows exactly the right tools, right? Like for example, journaling daily, yes, for me, it's a thing I don't do it every day as I used to, but at least 3 times a week. I will see myself like
That's
spending
good
time
because I think
just
that's important. Like I think sometimes people default to only journaling when they're sad, right? And
now.
it's
You gotta
like,
journal when you're happy. That's when you feel that gratitude and out too.
yeah, and I think too, like, because you called me logical, like to me, there's data in that of like, well, what's working, right? Instead of focusing on, because you can capture the data of what's not working, but let's also capture the data of what is working so we can go towards that,
Yeah,
you know?
I love it. Yeah. So on top of that, let's just give some other nuggets here. You said exercising. Um, I would say on top of all of this, like listening to things that actually puts you at higher states, like talks that there are all kinds of talks out there, but listening to like deeper talks, like things that your conscious mind doesn't necessarily can grasp at once. Like I find it more engaging for me to listen to more complex talks about something that I'm happy interested on the instead of those like random talks about, oh, but then she did this and then she did that, like just like kind of shallow like talks, that kind of thing. But challenging yourself, giving maybe yourself like 1 minute to nail down into one particular question, into something like, what do you understand about spirituality or any topic you come up, and just write everything you kind of feel and sense of that itself, right? Because what you realize is that from that piece, it's gonna take you somewhere else, and that's essentially it's gonna help you find your flow. So it's basically like just putting an input to help you eliminate everything that is not really necessary in order to get to what really matters. That
Yeah, I
essence.
mean, I think a lot of times people are always vying for our attention, right? And that's through social media and other things, emails, texts, phone calls, all that stuff, right? And I also understand from a certain perspective, right? We try to, there's so many negative things in the world that we try to stay on top of it, right? And try to help. However, two things with that. Number one, a lot of times when it comes to human crises, we don't need the real-time information. We're not in the trenches most of the time. What we need is actual perspective, right? And especially now with a lot of stuff going on, there's a lot of people who feel empathy, but it destroys them. And I'm like, I get where you're coming from. However, how does this help anyone for you to be in the trenches with them? What they need you to do is to have that calm, cool, collected way to see a path out of this,
Mm.
right? And that's not always easy for people to hear.
Like with anything in life, right? Because we prefer to be at a victim state instead of taking responsibility for our own lives and our own shit.
Well, it's not even that. I think, I think they feel like I have to feel the same hardship as the people that are truly being victimized in any world circumstance, right? But again, that doesn't help them. They don't need you to mourn and suffer with them on their level. What they need you to do is think of the solutions, to be that clear-headed and be there for them in that way that they truly need. So yeah, it's a difficult thing, and that's why, like, when you're talking about going deeper, yeah, we need that perspective to allow ourselves to have that and to remain in that elevated state versus going down.
Yeah, that's what it comes out at the end. Just stay creative. You want to stay high. You want to stay positive. Positivity helps your creative state. At least to me, it's tremendously. I create better when I'm at the highest state. And ultimately, what you just brought on is like it's stay on top of like we're problem solvers more than anything. And yes, there's always a solution as long as the eyes are open to see it. So Phil, thank you so much for joining this talk with me today. I was so excited about like, listening to your input on this and based on your experiences and your current approach and journey in life.